This video was made possible by the support of our Patreons, whose donations help us to improve the quality of our videos. Thank you so much for your generosity. Hello everyone and welcome to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. My name's Martin.
And my name is Alex.
Today we have a spooky, scary Halloween gameplay variant for you to enjoy, with everyone playing their most horrifying commanders. We start the game like any other and reveal a Halloween themed twist when the first player drops to below 20 life. For now, we'll just cover the surprise up with a pumpkin. With that out of the way, let's see those opening hands.
My commander is Muldrotha the Gravetide. I keep an opening hand of Llanowar Elves, Coiling Oracle, Tireless Tracker, Birthing Pod, Command Tower, Bloodstained Mire, and Verdant Catacombs.
My commander is Edgar. My opening hand consists of Commander's Sphere, Mortify, Temple of Malice, Sulphurous Springs, a mountain, a plains, and a swamp.
Ren's commander is Izoni Thousand-Eyed. He keeps an opening hand of Yavimaya Elder, Magus of the Abyss, Journey to Eternity, 2 forests and 2 swamps.
And finally, Tom's commander is Endrek, Master Breeder. His opening hand contains Soul Ring, Dictator Erebos, Diabolic Intent, Mutilate, Bajuka Bog, and 2 swamps. Ren wins the die roll and starts things off by playing a forest. He then passes to Tom.
Tom plays a swamp, followed by a turn 1 Soul Ring. He then passes the turn.
For my turn, I play Temple of Malice, scrying 1 card to the bottom of my library. I then end my turn.
I play Command Tower and then cast Llanowar Elves. Not quite a Soul Ring, but not bad. I then pass the turn.
In his turn, Ren plays a swamp before passing to Tom.
Tom plays a swamp and then casts Ophiomancer. He then ends his turn.
In my turn, I play Sulphurous Springs and then pass to Alex.
I start my turn by casting Coiling Oracle, revealing Baleful Strix on top of my library. I put the bird into my hand, play a High Market, and then end my turn.
Ren plays a forest and then casts Yavimaya Elder. He then passes the turn.
In his upkeep, Tom remembers that he should have made a 1/1 Snake with Death Touch in Martin's upkeep, and puts one onto the battlefield. He then plays a swamp and casts his commander, Endrek, Master Breeder. Moving to combat, Tom attacks Martin with his Ophiomancer, and Martin takes 2 damage. Tom then ends his turn.
I begin my turn by playing a plains, and then cast Commander's Sphere. With nothing more to do, I pass the turn.
In my turn, I cast Tireless Tracker, and then play Verdant Catacombs. I make a clue, move to combat, and attack Martin with my Oracle. He takes 1 damage, and then I end my turn.
Ren plays a swamp, and then casts Journey to Eternity, targeting his Yavimaya Elder. He chooses not to jump on the Everyone Attack Martin bandwagon, and passes the turn without attacking.
Tom plays a swamp, and then casts Diabolic Intent. He sacrifices his snake, searching his library for a Smothering Abomination, which he then casts. Endrek triggers, and Tom creates 4 1/1 Thralls. Moving to combat, Tom continues his trend of attacking Martin, this time swinging his commander at him. Martin takes the 2 damage, and then Tom ends his turn.
In my turn, I play a swamp, and then cast Legion Lieutenants. Edgar triggers, creating a 1/1 vampire token, and I cast Dark Imposter, creating another token. Finally having a board state, I pass to Alex, who sacrifices his Verdant Catacombs to put an overgrown tomb into play tapped, losing a life. He makes a clue, and then moves to his turn.
I start my turn by playing Bloodstained Mire, creating another clue. I then cast Baleful Strix, drawing a card from its ETB, and then pass the turn.
Ren plays a forest, and then casts Hermit Druid. He then ends his turn.
In his upkeep, Tom once again remembers that he should have made a snake in Martin's upkeep, and creates one. He then sacrifices a Thrall to Smothering Abomination, drawing a card. Next, Tom plays a swamp and moves to combat. He attacks Ren with his Abomination, dealing him 4 damage, and then passes to Martin.
I play Command Tower, and then cast my commander, Edgar. I move to combat and attack Ren with Edgar. Edgar's ability triggers, and I put a +1/+1 counter on each of my vampires. Ren blocks Edgar with his Elder, and then pays 2 mana to activate his creature's ability. He sacrifices it, drawing 2 cards, turns it to the battlefield of Journey to Eternity's ability, flips his enchantment into Azal, Cave of Eternity, and searches his library for 2 basic lands before putting them into his hand. I then end my turn, to which Alex responds by sacrificing his Bloodstained Mire to put Sunken Hollow into play tapped, losing a life. He then sacrifices a clue to draw a card, puts a +1/+1 counter on his tracker, and proceeds to his turn.
In my turn, I play a Polluted Delta, making another clue. I then pass the turn. Ren responds to this by sacrificing his Yavimaya Elder once more, putting 2 basic lands into his hand. He then moves to his turn.
For his turn, Ren plays a swamp. He then activates Hermit Druid's ability, milling a large number of cards until he finds a swamp, and puts it into his hand. He then moves to his end step, discards down to 7, and passes to Tom. Tom responds by flashing in Dictator Erebos, causing everyone else to groan. He then proceeds to his turn.
In his upkeep, Tom sacrifices a Thrall to Smothering Abomination, causing his Dictate to trigger. Ren responds by activating Atzal's ability, reanimating his Liliana Heretical Healer. Martin then sacrifices a Vampire token, I sacrifice Calling Oracle, and Ren is forced to sacrifice Hermit Druid. Liliana transforms into Liliana Defined Necromancer, making a 2/2 zombie when she does. Not amused by Ren's trick, Tom then plays Bajuka Bog, exiling Ren's graveyard. Tom then ends his turn.
In my turn, I play a mountain, and then cast Lightning Greaves. I equip them to Edgar, tap Commander's Sphere to add a white mana to my mana pool, and then sacrifice it to draw a card. I then use my floating mana to land cycle Ash Barrens, putting a Plains into my hand. Next, I cast Mortify, targeting Tom's Dictator Erebos. The enchantment is destroyed, and I move to combat. I attack Ren with Edgar, and Liliana with Dark Imposter and Legion Lieutenant. I put a +1/+1 counter on each of my creatures thanks to Edgar, and Ren blocks my commander with his zombie. Liliana's loyalty hits 0, and she leaves the battlefield. I then pass the turn, to which Alex responds by sacrificing his Polluted Delta to put Watery Grave into play. He loses a life to the fetch land, 2 more to have it enter untapped, and sacrifices 3 clues, drawing 3 cards and putting 3 +1/+1 counters on his tracker. Alex then moves to his turn.
I start my turn by playing a Forest, making another clue. Next, I cast Oracle of Muldrotha, revealing Memorial to Folly on top of my library. I play another Forest, make another clue, discard down to 7, and end my turn.
Ren plays a forest, and then casts Golgari's Signet. With nothing more to do, he passes the turn.
In his upkeep, Tom sacrifices a Thrall to Smothering Abomination, drawing a card. He plays High Market as his land for turn, and then uses it to sacrifice a Thrall, gaining a life. He draws a card thanks to Smothering Abomination, and then passes to Martin.
I begin my turn by playing Rakdos Guildgate, and then use Dark Imposter's ability to exile Alex's Baleful Strix. I put a +1/+1 counter on the Imposter, and then move to combat. I attack Alex with Edgar, and Ren with my Imposter and Lieutenants. I put a +1/+1 counter on each of my vampires as a result of Edgar's ability, and Ren uses Adsal to reanimate his Liliana. Ren then blocks my Imposter with Liliana, and Alex throws his Llanowar Elves under Edgar. Alex then taps his elf to float a green mana, Ren takes 5 damage and gains 2 from Liliana's lifelink. Before we change phases, Alex uses his floating mana to sacrifice a clue, putting a +1/+1 counter on his tireless tracker, and revealing Gonsi, Lord of Luxury, as his next card. He then sacrifices another clue, this time revealing the top card of his library to be Torment of Hailfire. Oh boy. I then pass the turn to Alex.
I draw Torment of Hailfire, revealing Sheoldred Whispering One as my next card. I then play Blighted Fen, sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on my tracker, and draw a card. Acidic Slime is revealed to be on top of my library, and I play Memorial to Folly as my second land, gaining another clue. Next, I cast Bane of Progress, destroying my 3 clues, Ren's Signet, Tom's Soaring, and Martin's Greaves. He enters with 6 +1/+1 counters, and I move to my end step. I discard down to 7, and end my turn.
In his turn, Ren plays Hissing Quagmire, and then casts Magus of the Abyss. Such a bizarrely worded card. He then passes to Tom.
In his upkeep, Tom chooses to let Ren destroy his Snake token, and then sacrifices his Abomination to its own ability. He draws a card from his Abomination, and then casts Torment of Hailfire, where X is 6. Martin, Ren, and I all choose to discard 3 cards and take 9 damage, and Tom then ends his turn.
I choose to let Ren destroy my Vampire token in my upkeep, play Command Tower, and move to combat. Tom once again forgets to make a snake in my upkeep, and I use my imposter's ability to exile his Ophiomancer, putting an end to his snake charmer related misplays. I put a +1/+1 counter on my imposter and then move to combat. I attack Tom with Edgar and the imposter, putting a +1/+1 counter on each of my creatures thanks to Edgar. Tom chooses not to block, taking 18 damage. Ouch. With nothing more to do, I pass to Alex.
In my upkeep, I let Ren destroy Oracle of Mordiah with his Magus. I then move straight to combat, attacking Martin with my Tireless Tracker and Tom with Bane of Progress. Martin blocks the tracker with his Lieutenant, and Tom takes the 9 damage. Given that a player's life total has dropped below 20, our mystery gameplay variant is revealed, Triskaidekaphobia, which will trigger in every player's upkeep. Things are about to get spooky. In my second main phase, I cast Birthing Pod, and then activate it. Sacrificing my Bane of Progress, I put Avenger of Zendikar onto the battlefield. Make 9 0/1 plant tokens, and end my turn.
Unfortunately for him, Ren has to destroy his Magus in his upkeep as a result of its own ability. He then chooses to have everybody gain a life from Triskaidekaphobia, and plays Arch of Orazka, gaining the city's blessing from land alone. Ren then activates his Archer's ability, drawing a card. He then ends his turn, discarding down to 7 before passing to Tom.
Tom chooses for everyone to gain a life in his upkeep, and then plays a swamp. He then casts Extraplanar Lens, exiling one of his swamps. Next, Tom casts Necromancy, returning Ren's Magus of the Abyss to the battlefield under his control. Realizing that he is the closest player to losing the game, Tom decides to troll the rest of us by casting Contamination. Blood Moon, eat your heart out. Satisfied with the rest of the table's cries of despair, Tom passes the turn.
In my upkeep, I choose to have each player lose a life, and then let Tom destroy Edgar with his Magus. Moving to combat, I attack Tom with Dark Imposter, and he blocks my Vampire with his Commander. I then pass to Alex.
I choose to let everyone gain a life in my upkeep, and let Tom destroy a plant token. In response to this, Martin uses his Imposter's ability to exile my Avenger of Zendikar, upsetting me greatly. He puts a +1/+1 counter on his Vampire, and I continue with my turn. I cast Sidisi Undead Vizier, sacrificing a plant token to her Exploit ability. I search my library for a card and put it into my hand, and then cast Liliana Heretical Healer. Moving to combat, I attack Martin with my Tireless Tracker, dealing him 9 damage. I then pass the turn.
Ren chooses for everybody to lose a life in his upkeep, and then draws a card using his Arch. Unable to cast anything thanks to Contamination, Ren passes to Tom.
In his upkeep, Tom sacrifices his Magus to Contamination, keeping it in play. He then casts Mutilate, giving all creatures -6/-6. Everything other than Dark Imposter and Tireless Tracker dies. And then Tom casts Yahini, Undying Partisan. With nothing more to do, Tom ends his turn.
I have everybody lose a life in my upkeep and play Orzhov Guildgate as my land for turn. Moving to combat, I attack Alex with Dark Imposter, paying 6 mana to exile his Tireless Tracker and put a +1/+1 counter on my Vampire. Alex takes 10 damage and I pass the turn.
In my upkeep, I choose for everyone to gain a life from Triskaidekaphobia. I then sacrifice Memorial to Folly to return Liliana Heretical Healer to my hand and immediately cast her. I then pass to Ren.
Ren has everybody lose a life in his upkeep, plays a forest and draws a card using his Arch. He then passes the turn.
Tom also chooses to have everyone lose a life in his upkeep, putting him at a rather dangerous 13 life. He then sacrifices Yahini to Contamination, plays a swamp and recasts his commander. Next, Tom casts Visceracia, making a Thrall, and then passes to Martin.
In my upkeep, Tom decides that he'd rather not lose the game to Triskaidekaphobia and uses High Market to sacrifice his Thrall, gaining a life. I then make everybody lose a life, putting Tom back on 13 life, and move to combat. I attack Ren with my Imposter, dealing him 10 damage. I then end my turn.
In my upkeep, Tom loses the game to Triskaidekaphobia. I then have everybody lose a life, putting both Martin and myself on 13. Moving to combat, I attack Ren with Liliana, wanting that sweet, sweet lifelink. But Martin responds by exiling her with Dark Imposter. I respond to this by sacrificing Liliana to High Market, gaining a life. Martin cries, and I move to my second main phase. I cast Demir's Signet, followed by Acidic Slime. I destroy Ren's Atzal with the Slime's ability, putting an end to his recursion shenanigans, and pass the turn.
In Ren's upkeep, I lose the game to Triskaidekaphobia, and Ren has everyone else lose a life. He then plays a swamp and casts the Mending of Dominaria. He mills 2 cards thanks to the Mending, returning Magus of the Abyss to his hand. Next, Ren casts Forhaven Elf, searching his library for a swamp and putting it into play tapped before passing to Alex.
In my upkeep, I sacrifice Acidic Slime to High Market, gaining a life. I then have everyone gain a life and cast my commander, Muldrotha the Gravetide. Not yet finished, I cast Sylvan Safekeeper and then pass the turn.
Ren has both players lose a life in his upkeep and then mills 2 cards as the result of the Mending of Dominaria. He returns Puppeteer Click to his hand and then casts it, returning Alex's Sidisi Undead Vizier to the battlefield. Ren then sacrifices Puppeteer Click with Sidisi's exploit trigger and returns it to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. This time, Ren puts Alex's Sheoldred Whispering one into play and then searches his library for a card with Sidisi's ability. He puts it into his hand and moves to combat, attacking Alex with Sidisi and Sheoldred. Alex declares no blocks, taking 10 damage. Not yet finished, Ren moves to his post-combat main phase. He casts Shamanic Revelations, drawing 4 cards and gaining 8 life. Ren then plays Bajuka Bog, exiling Alex's graveyard, and then ends his turn.
In my upkeep, I choose for both Ren and I to lose a life. I then cast Cyclonic Rift, paying the overload cost, returning Ren's whole board to his hand. I move to combat, attacking Ren with just my Sylvan Safekeeper, dealing him 1 damage and putting him at 13 life. I then pass the turn and watch as Ren loses the game in his upkeep. Ha ha ha! Alternate win conditions. How I love thee.
Well, that's it for our spooky scary Halloween gameplay video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like it. Feel free to follow us on Twitter @4Commander and check out our Patreon page. We'll see you next time.